So today is March the 16th, 2026. We are going to start the book of Vayikra today, third book in the Torah, defined by its lack of movement. There's, and maybe, with the exception of maybe one or two events, the consecration of the tabernacle in chapter 8 or so, and then the person who collected the blasphemer. There are very few stories in this book, which makes it a very dull book for people who like stories, and it makes it a very challenging book for people who want to find stories where there are none. And I put myself in the second category, trying to always find the story, the human dimension of these things, and what's taking place at the very human level, and just in general, as in terms of an overview. I mean, in the past we've talked about the book of Leviticus as really the essential book of the Torah, because it relates to things that are essential in human nature, and they have to do with what it means to be a human being, what it means to be connected to God, what it means to feel this sense of awe and devotion, and what limits they will go to. And then, of course, once we get to the middle of the book, what constitutes holiness? And this will be the great theme. This will be the great theme of the book of Leviticus. But as usual, we start this book with a set of questions, and in order to do that, I want to do something a little different this morning, and just show the text of the Torah, and show that the text of the Torah itself leads us to certain questions relating to the beginning of the Torah. And we're fortunate; we live in the digital age. We can see. Without, for me, having to go to the synagogue, take out my phone and snap the picture of the parchment. There happens to be a good example of a Torah document online at the British Museum or British Library, I think it is, and I'll put it up in a second here. This is what the scroll looks like, okay? So are you all seeing this? Yeah, I guess you are, right? Thumbs up if you're seeing this. All right, so this is a very, very old Sefer Torah, 1450 something, from the British Museum, British Library. And this Torah scroll evidently is a copy of the Aleppo Codex, which is the most authoritative codex of the Torah, and of course the entire Bible. The story of the Aleppo Codex, Maimonides probably it comes into being around the 10th century, and it is reportedly the text that Maimonides himself used and consulted when he wrote all of his works. This is a copy. This is based on that about 4 centuries later. So I'm going to enlarge it here, if that's possible. Yeah, okay. So what you have here is the end of the book of Exodus, okay? At the bottom is the end of the book of Exodus, and it says, Vayichasa anan et ol moed. I'll have this in a real text in a moment. The cloud covered the tent of meeting, and the glory of God filled the Mishkan. And then it says here, if you can make out the last 2 lines here, Velo Yachol Moshe, top of the next column, Lavo Elo Moed, he couldn't go into the tent of meeting, Ki Shachan Alav Ha'anan, because the cloud was on it, Uchvod Adonai Maleh et HaMishkan. And the glory of God filled the Mishkan. So we have a bit of poetry here. And then it says, Uvaloto adanan me'ala Mishkan, when the cloud goes up from the Mishkan, from the sanctuary, Yisu b'nei Yisrael, the children of Israel would travel, b'chol masehem, on all their travels. V'im lo yaleh anan, and if the cloud didn't go up, lo yisu, they wouldn't travel ad yom ha'aloto, until the day that they would travel. Ki anan Adonai ala mishkan yomam ve'esh tiyeh laila bo. I get, there's a lot of music in those verses. Ki le'nei kol Yisrael b'chol masehem. The cloud would always be on the sanctuary day by day, and the fire would be on it at night, before all of the eyes of Israel, on all of their travels, and of course, chazak, chazak, v'nit chazek. That's the end of the Parsha. Now, the text, the Torah scroll signifies the end of the book with this gap here, okay? So if you count here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 empty lines here. And that seems to be the convention, certainly the convention of this scroll. I bet you it's the convention of scrolls up until today. But there are some significant, just in terms of, this is ephemera here. There are some idiosyncrasies of this particular scroll. For example, there's a bit of a space between these two, and a modern, that is to say, a Torah scroll that we have in the Ark, none of them would have two spaces just because it's the end of a paragraph. Okay, and this scroll has a set of idiosyncrasies. The other thing that you could see about this, as idiosyncratic as it is, you would not find just these are footnotes here, but a modern Torah scroll wouldn't have the lameds, and a modern Torah scroll would be justified. Okay. It would be right justified and left justified. And you would be able to take a ruler down from, and see that everything lined up. And I'd have to do a little more research to ask, why is it that this text looks a little choppy? And the best I can come up with off the top of my head is because, in seeing facsimiles of the Aleppo Codex, the lines of the Aleppo Codex are also like this. So the Aleppo Codex gave much more value to the regular size of the letters, as opposed to, what is called kerning, Kerning, squeezing the letters or making the letters expanding. Okay, and the only reason why I'm laughing about this is because whenever I write my Parsha sheets, it's a great discipline to be limited to about 1,800 words. Okay, 1 second, Peter. Steve, to be limited to that number of words, because you have to fit everything on the page. Sometimes I have more to say, and I need more room. So that means I have to kind of cut out a lot of sentences or re-edit things, or occasionally I have a setting in Microsoft Word that allows you to shrink just by a digital, a decimal of a point. You can actually shrink the spaces. So a person reading won't really notice it, but it makes the difference between, whether a word can fit on a line and push me to a third page, or whether or not I get a second, I can keep everything to 2 pages. It's just a little trick. And I'm laughing because we think this is a modern trick, but in fact it's a trick of scribes to extend by microscopic extensions letters, so that they all fit in line, so that there's a sense of justification on both sides. I got a couple of questions here, so go ahead, Steve Parkov.
I have a small screen. When you said chazak, chazak,
it wasn't there
in the Torah, right? You just said that.
I made it up.
Okay, okay, fine.
Okay, go, Bob.
Yeah, I wonder if you could just put up the text one more time, because I have a question. The commentators spend a lot of time on the first word, Vayikra,
Yes.
You keep talking
Ah,
about
very good
the
point. Look at
small
that.
olive, which is not small there at all.
It's not small there at
And,
all.
and I'm
Okay.
wondering, since that's a big part about humility and all that, what's your
Uh,
thoughts about why there's no small olive here? And what
I'll
is
tell you what my thoughts are. You're not going to like this.
I
Okay.
know.
My thoughts are that the scribe didn't care about any of that, and it just goes to show you that there are a lot of different idiosyncrasies in the calligraphy of a text and conventions regarding big letters and small letters. And I don't want to burst any bubbles here, but the fact that we have created a whole corpus of interpretation around these things just signifies I'm going to say it in the nicest way possible and the most generous way possible. I think the creative instincts of the Jewish people to find meaning in these things, and of course we know what the what some of these midrashim point to, but on with regard to textual phenomena, look, I just showed you even in this particular scroll, an idiosyncrasy is that not it's you get larger spaces between paragraphs than you do in a modern scroll, and I'm sure if we I'd love to spend the time looking over that actual document, and we could find, and there have been monographs written about it, and I'm sure that's not the only one. Go ahead,
But what
Alana.
invalid,
No, it's right.
sorry, just so what invalidates then a Torah?
What invalidates the Torah I guess you could say that we have conventions for what it is today, and at the very least, when a letter is chipped or missing, or when there's a mistake, that invalidates the Torah. This would not constitute a mistake by the scribes. Go ahead, Alana.
I'm sure most of you know that the small aleph is to indicate how modest Moshe was when he was called by his name by Hashem.
That's
So
right. We know that, but I'm just going to put it up again because as I said, this particular scribe didn't really care about that. That where my cursor is, it's a normal aleph, and so all of those midrashim based on how modest Moses was are irrelevant. He didn't care. Okay. What's interesting again is that in the text of the Torah as it is here, the scroll. I'm more interested in the empty space and the fact that this is the end of the book, and that the end of the book is connected to the next book. And so what we have is a set of really what I would go conventional questions, which is how is one book connected to the next book, and I'm just going to show you a little clearer here, because I took this a screenshot of this scroll, and here I enhanced it to give you a little bit more contrast, so and take away the darkness of it, and you could see again, this is a little more contrast, so you can see a little more clearly. Okay, so there's a space between the two scrolls, and what this means is that and here, of course, I can be free to speak in this way. The Torah is an edited book, and the book of Exodus contains all of these things, and you can see how it comes to its conclusion. But the when the Torah is put together as a Torah, there is the sense that what we are now in is a set of discrete material that it's going to be put together, right? I don't want to use the term encyclopedia or anthology or whatever, but there is a truism about literature, and that is it didn't come to us in this form. Traditional belief has it that way, and at least we are modest enough to say, it might be a little more complicated than that, and that's where we're then. That's where one big, huge question and field in biblical studies is, how does the Bible come to be the Bible? And, when we've had Gary Rensburg talk about this, and he has a book on this, and there are lots and lots of good literature on this, okay? Anybody else have any questions on this? We got Alana, yeah.
In both texts, the original Torah and this one, there is a yud missing in the word alehem.
You want to?
It's the wrong spelling. Alehem
Alehem.
should have, they both, yeah, in the usual, in the regular
All
Torah,
right.
it's
Well, we're not gonna focus on the text, but again, this is in the category of the textual transmission, and things are there, things are not, and there are lots of different ephemera in this Torah scroll.
because the word alehem is
Has a
very
yod in it. Yeah,
similar. It's very similar to Elohim.
that's
So,
correct. Correct. Okay. So I'm going to just now we'll make it a little clearer. So this is what it means. The cloud covered the tent of meeting, and God filled the cloud, and it was a very foggy day today. And here's what fog looks like. Okay, this cloud, and I'm showing this visually in order to try and create a visual or imaginative context for this experience that Moses, they construct the Mishkan. It's so filled with smoke, actually. What's going on here? Moses was not able to come into the tent of appointment, for the cloud took up dwelling in it, and the glory of God filled the question. So I'm asking here, what prevents Moses from entering? Is he afraid? Does he not think he will be able to breathe? If he is afraid that he will die, what does this mean about religion, life, and death? I don't think these questions are really dealt with by traditional commentators, but that's okay. I'm allowed. We're all allowed to ask our questions. And it occurred to me in reading, that this idea that Moses was not able to go into the tent of the appointment, what does it mean? If he's not able to go in, it means, anybody could walk into a cloudy room. Anybody could walk into a smoky room. You don't walk into a smoky room for one reason, because you are afraid that if you go into the smoky room, you won't be able to breathe. And so you don't even have to make a decision here. You understand that I won't survive. And so if you understand that you won't survive going in, then you've already, not even subconsciously, but you're stating, I prefer to live than to be with God, right? And that's I think that would qualify as a sermon, but I have to test this with my colleagues, but this is a plain interpretation, which is, of course he doesn't go in. He doesn't go in because he knows he's not going to be able to breathe. And if he knows he's not going to be able to breathe, then it stands to reason that he values his life outside. He values staying alive more than he values being with God. And that's a profound religious statement that we never even talk about, right? You would think, in the ways that we've constructed Moses' character, that all he wants to do is be with God, but he can't, because he can't breathe. So it means you have to be alive. And so I would even add here, and here I would say that this is more sermonic, he's choosing life here. Even though he wants to be with God, he's choosing to stay alive. Susie, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think beyond that, there's only so close that you can get to the king when you walk into the throne room, because it's just not, proper etiquette. So I think that's going on too.
Yeah, look, we can construct a set of images here, and certainly the divine, the king, the royalty image is a good image. But kings are people too, and they do need to.
Yeah, so al had kama v'chama, so.
you know, again, it's worth the debate, because God, panim el panim, there is this kind of expression of divine intimacy that God has with Moses. So the proximity is part of it. You could, and I've been very attentive to, or attuned to, the notion of boundaries and zones and what constitutes all of that. And it's quite clear here that a zone has been created in which Moses cannot enter, because there's too much God in that zone. And I want to hold that as the kind of question for what that means or what that implies. And for that, I want to just use some other examples here. And so and because we do have other examples of things like this in the Torah and also in the Tanakh. So I've established the point that Moses chooses life here, even though it doesn't say so. It's a good homily, and I think it's defensible that we have within Judaism already in the Bible a humane tradition of life over death and life outside of the proximity with God, as opposed to death in the proximity with God. Okay, no one can be in my presence and live. So it means, oh well, you're just not going to have to be next to God all the time. I think we can deal with that. Okay. Another example of where there is entry into the cloud or the fog is at chapter 20, when the God does reveal the Ten Commandments. Okay, the people stand from a distance. Vayamona merachok uMoshe nigash el ha'arafel asher shama Elohim, and Moses approached the thick cloud. Now, I'm going to be picky about that verse, chapter 20, verse 18 in the book of Exodus, because nigash el ha'arafel, he approaches the arafel, but it doesn't tell us whether he goes into the arafel. So, a defensible reading of this is that there is a cloud on the mountain and he cannot go in, but he goes next to the cloud. And of course, is there a boundary? Is there a cone? Is there a sphere boundary between the cloud and outside? You just know where it is. It's like, and many of us, and of course we had this experience today, very cloudy, foggy day. So if you were driving earlier today, you have a visibility problem, right? You are not able to see much in terms of what's ahead of you. So what the smoke would be.
Do you want to listen to the rabbi's class?
What would be the visibility? Okay, let me go on here. All right. So Moses, he called to Moses, God spoke to him from the tent of appointment, speak to the children of Israel, say to them, anyone among you brings a near offering for God, the domestic animals from the herd or from the flock you may bring near to your offering. Okay? So we get the whole beginning of the Torah HaKorbanot, the laws relating to the sacrifices, which we've studied in the past, and which captivate our imaginations in a certain way, but I'm interested more in the story of, well, how is God calling him? And that, of course, is and here you see a smaller olive that already entered the Masoretic text. And the idea that the call comes out of the tent of meeting as the tent is covered with smoke. Here is a similar moment. So as I said, this shouldn't surprise us if, the Bible, studying the Bible, we assume that you know the whole Bible. But go to one of the great passages in the whole Bible, which is Solomon's dedication of the temple, referred to it a lot. I think it's a great text that people ought to know. Chapter 8, book of Kings, Kings 1. So first it tells us in verse 9, chapter 8, verse 9, Ein ba'aron rak shnei luchot ha'avanim. I looked at that last week, that in the story of the tablets, the ark contained the tablets of Moses, Asher iniach sham Moshe b'chorev, that Moses put in Chorev. And what was so fascinating when we looked at that story is that this is a claim that the narrator is making about the Ark of the Covenant with, I'm assuming, not having investigated, what's in there. Nobody, to my knowledge, nobody ever opened the box again, okay? But they're relying, and I wrote the whole Parasha about that last week, it remains secluded and it retains its holiness because it's sequestered, it's secret, like all important things need to be put away, like, for example, the standard for the meter, okay, it's in a vault. So he placed the tablets there. This is the God made a covenant. So they're looking at the ark and they see a moment of antiquity. It's 400 and something, 50 years after the Exodus when this takes place. So you can imagine, how important it is to people to see this evidence from antiquity. It would be the equivalent, the United States is 250 years old, so looking at the Declaration of Independence, which is a 250-year-old document, or other things that come from that time, even seeing, buildings that have been built in the 18th century, I think we get an enormous sense of, awe out of looking at it. And of course, for all of us who travel and visit archaeological sites in Israel, we see things that are 2,000 years old, that are much older than what the Ark of the Covenant would have been to even Solomon. I said this in the past, that when we visit the Western Wall, we are seeing architecture and engineering from 2,000 years ago, and it's extraordinary. We are filled with a kind of awe and wonder as to how that building came into existence, and the fact that it's still standing, and that gives us a sense of connection to a place that is something that most people can't relate to, but Jews can relate to and say, we are here, we are standing on the same plaza, the same area, the same quadrant as Jews did 2,000 years ago. It's an extraordinary feeling. So that contact is very important. And then when it's the next verse, the priest came out of the sanctuary, and the cloud had filled the house of God. Chapter 8, verse 10. So here Solomon built the temple. They're about to use it for the first time. And the priests are all in there. They're in the kind of courtyard. And basically, they can't get in because the house is filled with a cloud. And they couldn't serve. They couldn't perform the service. Because the cloud of the God and the presence of God filled the house of God. So this is an extraordinary moment. John, I'll get to in a second. This is an extraordinary moment in the sense that what went wrong here? I mean, I'm going to ask it in that way, because I could also ask in another way, which is, wow, this is such an extraordinary moment that there's just too much of God's presence. Okay? Now, I don't want to pull back the curtain on the how they did this, right? Or what's going on, in terms of the physics of offering and the physics of smoke. But I just want to give a little bit of, I wouldn't be honest if I didn't give a little bit of cynicism here, which is that this is the first time they're using it, the first time they're doing it, and they're just doing it in such a way that I don't know, they lit up too much firewood. It's too much smoke. I'll give you my example is, you can sometimes when you light a kind of stick of incense, you don't do this properly, and if you do it improperly, the whole room will fill up with smoke, and you won't be able to breathe in there. Okay, and that to me, this kind of smacks of a certain, well, of course God's presence filled the place, but of course it's possible that they just lit too much. John, go ahead.
Well, question. Did God instruct the Israelites not to open the ark? You read last week the text
Just a minute.
talking about the placement of the scrolls in the ark, but nowhere in there is any instruction as to what to do with the scrolls. And if they didn't open it for all this time, you would think, well, I question, is there a commandment not to open it, or they?
There's a commandment not to touch it.
I'm sorry, what is it?
The commandment is you're not to go near the ark, and certainly a non-priest cannot make contact with it. And we have the example from the book of Samuel where David is, there's a little, I have to give you credit because there's a little bit of ambiguity in the Torah, in the later prophets or the early prophets about this. Like in the early part of the book of Samuel, the Israelites are engaged in a war with the Philistines. Okay, and so they say, let's bring out the secret weapon. We'll bring out the ark, chapter 4-5 in the book of Samuel, and once we bring the ark out, it's like bringing out the doomsday weapon, and because as it says in the book of Numbers, Vayi ben Saharon vayor Moshe, right? We say this still to this day every time we take the Torah. Kuma Adonai ve'afutzu oivecha. Arise, God, and let your enemies be dispersed. Ve'onusa misanecha mipanecha, and let all those who hate you, let them spread out, let them be dispersed, right? So there is the sense that the ark is a weapon. You can, quote, weaponize it, and that way it has a force field around it, and everyone will disperse. So they say, let's take it out so we'll defeat the Philistines with it. What happens? It's brilliant. The Philistines capture it. They capture it and they put it in their own temple. And of course, in a way that only the book of Samuel could describe, they ridicule the god of the Philistines. His name is Dagon. He's sitting on his pedestal, and when they put the ark in front of him, he falls down. His face falls off. It's just it's a comedy in a way, and they end up saying, "Why? How can we can't keep this? We're only getting calamities if we keep this ark with us." So they put it on a wagon and they send it back to the Israelites. That's story number one. Story number two is familiar to us because it's one of the Haftarot where David takes the ark and all of the different appurtenances of the sanctuary and they're moving them to the city of David. They are in a temporary location in Shiloh, and he wants to move it because he wants to establish the capital in Jerusalem in the city of David. So in order to move this, it's a big, big procession. And what happens? They put it on a wagon, and as things will happen, the wagon jostles. A guy named Uzzah tries to hold on to the ark so it won't fall. And the minute he holds on to it, boom, he dies. Why does he die? Because it's too holy. And you have to maintain a certain kind of cohesion in the text because holy objects have lethality to them. If you touch them, you die. If you're not the appropriate person, you will die. And so those are examples of who and when the ark is in. So most of the time, it will be invisible. But the practicality is that you got to move it from time to time. And if you move it from time to time, things, calamities would happen. So these illustrate that point. Okay, go ahead, Susie.
Yeah, so that story's always bothered me
Well,
because
sure.
it's like, what are you supposed to do? Let the thing fall? I mean, that would be like a catastrophe.
So you're right, but and it's connected to the story of Nadav and Avihu, if I'm not mistaken, where that's the Haftorah, and so what you have here is, the interpretive move that it's zeal that contributes to his action. He dies because he's so overly zealous. Okay, we'll move on. All right, so we have the similarity in the Book of Kings. And now, do we think the King's moment is influenced by the Exodus moment? I could make that. I could do that. But let's go to another aspect of this. So, what do we make of the juxtaposition of the end of Exodus and the beginning of Leviticus? The cloud fog, which is, I'm saying, here's the story. The story is that they're so excited about putting up the sanctuary that God is filled with it and Moses can't get into it, okay? So is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? Is this disappointment? Is this, what's going on? What's the story here? And what's the theology here? So Rashbam comments, and he's not the only one. There's a whole host of people from the Middle Ages, the classical commentaries, and also the Midrashim that talk about it, and he says as follows: Vayikra Moshe lefi shekatav lamala b'sof hasefer lo yachol Moshe lavo elo ha'moed. The reason why he is called here is because we have to stitch the beginning of Vayikra with the end of Shmot and say, in view of our being told at the end of the last portion that Moses could not enter the tabernacle, this is why now God called to Moses. So, in other words, it's the story is, I see that you're outside and I need to talk to you. How am I going to talk to you? I have to call you. That's the story. The story is, so you're outside, you can't come in, so this is going to be, as it were, a communication from inside, with a boundary marker between it. This is an interesting story because earlier on in the book of Exodus, it says that God would speak to Moses from above the wings, the kruvim. That's where this kind of micro, speaker would be, and that in order to get communication, he would have to go into the Holy of Holies and speak to him. But that evidently doesn't happen. And what that means is the Holy of Holies, schematically, is the replica of the top of the mountain, where God speaks to Moses originally. God speaks to Moses originally when Moses is summoned into the cloud of the mountain, on top of the mountain, and God will speak to him. But here, you can give a very defensible interpretation that God calls Moses when God is, quote, inside the Holy of Holies, and Moses remains outside. Which means that we are moving through, we are moving beyond a certain circumscribed space for God's transmission of the Word of God. And that there's a profound, in my opinion, a profound theology here, which is that God's Word is not only located within a holy confines, that God's Word can come out. And that Moses, who is the one who is attuned most to God's Word, will hear it even outside of it. I give you the analogy, and I like this analogy a lot because it works well, which is God is the transmitter and Moses is the receiver. And, or if you've ever had the chance to even see a photograph of these radio antenna, okay, what makes them extraordinary instruments is the ability to gather signals in such a way and to reflect the signal to a single point, and then amplify those signals and then decode them or to kind of translate them into either visual imagery or or sound or another form, and do we know from where it's transmitted, and do we know how it is transmitted through space? Well, we don't really know. What we believe is that it's either waves or particles, right? But we can't see the waves and we can't see the particles, and so we kind of believe that the energy form that it originates from is that the energy is transmitted in some way, and that it depends on the quality of the receiver. I and you, we can receive certain kinds of visual stimuli based on the visual spectrum. But unless we have implants in our ears or our brains, we won't be able to hear the spectrum that's beyond hearing and sight. Okay, but a radio can, a good AM and FM radio can hear, can take visual auditory information that's transmitted on radio waves, and then take the radio waves, split the sound from the waves, amplify the sound, and give us sound. Well, Moses is the extraordinary receiver, and God is the transmitter. And most of us don't have, we don't have a lot of tubes in us. We just don't have the transistors, and this is a highly non-egalitarian view of the world, where some of us are endowed with a transistor or two, and some of us have a whole motherboard. Okay, and yeah, there are people that have extraordinary capabilities with being attentive and attuned to certain things. The same way, not everyone can throw a basketball like Michael Jordan, and not everyone can check like, or shoot a puck like Bobby Orr. I mean, I use these examples all the time, and to illustrate that there's something called the degree of human achievement and excellence and just raw talent that is not available to most of us. I wish, and we're delighted by performance and music and human artistry, and what delights us about is that human beings are capable of achieving and performing in such a magnificent way, and that when we watch this, we enjoy it, we derive tremendous pleasure of it, and we perform a kind of projection activity when we see this, which is, well, I'm the one that's singing, I'm the one that's listening, I'm the one that's on the stage, I'm the one that's there also. There's a bit of that magic going on there. And so the theology here is that Moses is receiving it, but we're all imagining that we're there too. Go ahead, John.
I think God could have facilitated the communication by shrinking himself, allowing room for Moses. And I think in the Kabbalah, that's a big concept, that God shrunk himself to make room for humanity.
So that concept is called tzimtzum, right? Where there's a kind of shrinking of the divine presence. And then, again, we'll go into the mystical language of, God not filling in. And you could, in the mystics, and I'll get my consultations here, the mystics will look at this text and say, the only way that God can actually speak is by contracting a little bit and then allowing that. Because in the end, it's a temporary state where the cloud fills the sanctum, right? The cloud can't stay there forever. It has to kind of dissipate. Go ahead, Skip. That means Bob.
Do the rabbis comment at all on the possibility of telepathy?
Yeah, I that would be such a great angle to it, telepathy, and I don't have a source that comes to mind, but I will ask for one telepathically. I mean, it stands to reason that this kind of magic was known in antiquity. Astrology was known in antiquity, and soothsaying and divination, all of this. Now, I have an example that I go back to from recent events, which is, in I think it was Rosh Hashanah 2024. I don't remember how I got onto this website, but the headline, it was from the Hebrew magazine La Isha. Okay, why I got this in a clip, I don't know, but it was the horoscope prediction for 2024 in the Hebrew magazine La Isha. So I thought, okay, I need a distraction. Let me look at this, okay? And sure enough, there was an election, and there was, it was comical in that half of the astrologers said that Kamala Harris would win, and the other half said that yeah, you got it there. So that Donald Trump would win. So the ones that said that Donald Trump would win the election were obviously correct, okay? But then it said something. There's one astrologer that says that the war that is going on now, from October 23 through 24, will continue all the way to April of 2026. And that's just about now. So if you believe that, then the war will be over and everything will be fine, okay? But, it takes enormous amount of, and the reason for this is because of the planet Pluto and all that. And there's a whole science around this, okay? Which, we can reject or not. But do people have intuition? Do people, we don't need intuition to read a person's face. We don't need intuition to read a person's body. That's just communication. We all speak, with our faces and our bodies and without words. I'm sure everybody has the experience of, when you are in a room and someone walks into a room and you don't know, you didn't see it, but you feel a certain kind of electricity. You feel that there's a different energy in the room. If you're deeply attentive to these things, then it is a kind of telepathy, right? And meditation and the spiritual life enjoys in reaching the boundary of these kind of transcendent and numinous experiences. I think it's true, and I want to go one step further, which is I've noticed, and it's my anecdotal experience in being around occasionally deeply spiritual people in the Orthodox world. I get visits often from people who are collecting money, and they come to, I have relationships with them over decades now, so we're kind of friends, and I think there's an addiction to this. I really do. It's when they talk about their Rebbe or they talk about a certain experience, they light up, and they speak with such a glow and such a kind of effervescence, and or when they hear a Devar Torah, a Chiddush, they love that stuff. I mean, you could look on YouTube. There are examples of course, they're mostly in Hebrew, but there are a few in English. They're hard to listen to because they speak in a different language, really. But if you see the way Hasidim, gather around the teacher or the Rebbe, it's food for them. I do want to use the word addiction as a certain high that people get without substances. You're not using alcohol, although sometimes they are, or drugs. But it's like, did you hear what the Rebbe said? And to hear a story and to have that kind of joy from that's addictive. These miracle stories that you'll see sometimes or hear sometimes, you can be addicted to it. When people say to me, Rabbi, we need something inspiring, we need something comforting, they're not speaking out of addiction, but they're saying, feed us a little bit. Feed us in this way. We want that sense of satisfaction because we need it. And we always need that. Susie, go ahead.
Yeah, so this sort of thing doesn't happen to me every day.
Okay.
But yeah.
But we're going to see
I've been to Israel multiple times since 1969. I was there during the Second Intifada with the Zira Kroll Foundation. And
his concert, by the way, was yesterday, and it was lovely.
Yeah, I wasn't there. I'm sure it was, yeah. That was Hazamir, wasn't it?
Hazamir, right.
Yeah, the kids one, yeah. So my niece was supposed to get married October 10th, 2023. And so So I went, but I was having been to Israel for, and I went after the Gulf War as a volunteer. I was terrified of going on that trip. And I kept on feeling that something bad was going to happen, like there was going to be terrorism. I landed there on the 5th and everything was fine. And so I calmed down a little bit. And then, well, you know what happened.
When did you come back?
I came around the 15th. I was able to get out a day earlier than originally planned.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
I flew El Al, so I was
So
able.
you had a kind of premonition. Look, there were people that were talking before. I mean, I remember hearing Yair Lapid, 2 weeks before October 7th, saying something terrible was going to happen. We're getting, there's all sorts of chatter, and there was. I mean, we go back to that time and think it was like such a beautiful. There was such a calm. There was such a. Everything was just so, and everything was shattered. That's how it is. Well, that's where we're going with this, which is, I'm going to skip the rest of the Rashbam here, but I want to ask these final questions. What are we to make of this? And you've heard me talk about this. So this is a theme that I'm developing here, which is, the Bible really has a set of Plan A and Plan B, and this is not the first time. So I'm going to I made this chart, and I'll make it creation. It's God's great plan, but what happens at creation? People become sinful, and God sends a flood. So there's a Plan B. Abraham is supposed to be the father. I will make you the father of the great nation, but it doesn't. Abraham is not the father of the 12 tribes. I believe that God that the plan is supposed to be that Abraham is the father of the 12 tribes or the father of the nation, but Abraham is too loyal to his family and too loyal to his brother and there's too much that goes wrong. It takes 2 generations for the plan to unfold. It's not until Jacob, and then Jacob has the nation, the crucible of the nation, with 12 tribes. He's whole, but then he loses one of his sons. Then you go to the Exodus. Read carefully. You've heard me give this talk. The Exodus was you read chapter 12, they slaughter their lamb, they put the blood on the doorpost, they roast the lamb, and then afterwards, they're supposed to eat the roasted lamb with the unleavened bread, the baked unleavened bread, and then they are supposed to go out. None of that happens. They slaughter it. They put the blood on the doorpost. They're roasting it, but it's in the middle of the night. The plan goes awry. And they leave without eating, and they only bake the matzah without the Korban Pesach, without the meal, until the following day. My colleagues disagree with me on this reading, but I think it's a very compelling reading. When God wants to reveal the Torah, the people were supposed to be going up the mountain, but it ends up that people stay at the base of the mountain, and it's a catastrophe. The people were supposed to wait patiently, but the people, don't, and they worship the golden calf. The first tablets were supposed to be the operative tablets, but the second tablets became the operative tablet. Moses, in our situation, is supposed to go into the tent, but he can't. He stays out of the tent. Go forward into the book of Leviticus. Aaron and the priests were to be consecrated on the 8th day. Nadav and Avihu are killed on the 8th day. The scouts are supposed to ritually report to Moses on the beauty of the land. That whole scene, which we make such a great story out of, it's a reading of that scene is that they are to go and make a very, very symbolic report. And what happens? They say, terrible land. The people are supposed to enter the land shortly after Exodus. They don't for another 40 years. The people are to remain in the land as a sovereign nation. Here now it's like, this is really where it hurts us. The people are exiled from the land after God determined that they were no longer eligible. How much of Plan A is imprinted on us, and how much of Plan B is imprinted on us? And I want to say that as a kind of, I'm saying it with a sense of tragedy, and I'm saying it with a sense of reality, and I'm saying it with a sense of embrace. with joy even. And I want to get to the point where my humanity, all of our humanity, resonates with this, because I don't even have to guess here. Each of us had a plan A, and each of us is living in a plan B, or a plan C, or a plan D. Okay? Let's be honest. So this is a way of seeing life. We all know that, and by the way, we all learn to love our plan Bs, and we all learn to embrace them, because otherwise you might as well, just walk off a cliff. We choose life. The Torah is about that. The Torah is about not settling for that, but the Torah is about integrating a new reality that is different from how we expected it. That's what a mature person is about. That's what a human being is about, right? If we were only to live in the fantasies that we've constructed for us, based on the illusion of perfection, well, maybe we would be living in a fantasy. Do some people live in a fantasy? I don't know. Do some people have an idyllic life? I don't know anybody who lives an idyllic life. I don't care what anybody says. Some people have good lives. Some people have, are content. God bless them. But everybody's got plan Bs. And that's, I think, what's happening here. The plan A of life is you're supposed to go in there and be with God. The plan B, you got to stay out. Go ahead. Anyway,
But how much are we supposed to try to get from plan A to plan B? Should we accept it right away, or should we keep trying to get to reach plan A?
I think that's a great human struggle. The great human struggle is to live in tension with what your ideal is. Look, in another word, that's called Messianism. The late Rabbi Matt said this better than anybody else. He said, Messianism is really about judging your present in light of a perfect future. The redemptive, idyllic future that we want means that everything in the present is not matching up. And so what that ought to do is pull you and create the tension with something that is idyllic. And I reflect on those words a lot, because they make a lot of sense. Are we supposed to work towards? We are at some point. I think we establish a certain contentment by accepting the plan Bs of our life, right? I think joy and happiness and contentment is about understanding that, we live in an unredeemed world, and we have to make the best of it. Okay, that. We're never going to be, I'll say it as a joke, I'm never going to be a player in the NHL. I'm never going to be, I'm never going to, there are things that are just beyond my capability, okay? And I accept that. And that's the joy of liminality, the joy of finitude. Rabbi David Hartman spoke about this all the time, to say, there's certain dreams and aspirations that we have, and you know what? We accept that we are limited. And this is really, I think, a central theme in the whole Bible. Never mind the Torah. Okay, Bob, go ahead, and then Susie.
I'm going to go way, way out on a limb.
Go ahead.
And make a connection, if possible, with Star Trek.
Okay,
what's been
we love
talking
that.
Today. That's it. And I actually have a modicum of support from AI, because I was just looking it up.
Okay, we accept that too.
So there's an episode in the original series where there's a white cloud, and it's called The Companion. And the people who enter the cloud die very suddenly from suffocation. But the cloud also communicates with Zefram Corcoran, who was the inventor of the warp drive. And what's very interesting is that they communicated, it brought him life. And at the end of this section, and I'll text it to you, it says, in summary, Zefram Corcoran is the, quote, Moses of the stars, who was saved from aging by a cloud, the companion, and whose legacy is linked to the Jewish-influenced Vulcan hand sign. And so I don't know quite what to make of that, but it's a real stretch to where did these things
what
come
to
from?
make of it is that I think that Gene Roddenberry and the creators and the writers of Star Trek were they understood literature and they understood the Bible on some level, not not in a but they understood this mythology and they understood these ideas well, and they were doing something. They understood also that they were doing something revolutionary at the time when they were writing this. Of course, nothing like that had ever been created. So that's what I would make out of it. Susie, go ahead.
Yeah, so in line with what you were saying, I don't remember who this was or what her exact situation was, but there was some woman who had some crisis in her life. And I remember her saying, you get on a plane and you're going, your destination is city X. And I mean, she had something specific, but I don't remember. She said, and then you get off the plane and you're in city Y, and it's not where you wanted to be. She said, but then you discover that city Y is a good place too.
Right, and I think that's what maturity is. It is about coming to terms with your life, the way it unfolds, knowing that there always is going to be some kind of tension with the perfect iteration. But as I said, the plan B is pretty good too. In fact, our joy in life is accepting what plan B is and learning to really have a lot of comfort in that. I can see that my video feed is a little choppy, and this is a good place where we can stop. So thank you very much, everyone, and we'll see you next week on our